So the warrior is all about being committed to something greater than our own personal feelings. The warrior is very much can be robotic without the other archetypes. The warrior has a positive mental attitude, an unconquerable spirit, great courage. He's fearless. He takes responsibility for all his actions. And also there's a big aspect of discipline, of self-discipline. And one of the things I wrote from the book was willing to suffer in order to achieve what he wants to achieve, disciplined of mind and body. Commitment to ideals and principles and values rather than personal feelings.
Absolutely. Yeah, he's that powerhouse of energy. Yeah, he really is. He has that source. He is the source, of that transpersonal commitment. How do I carry that out? It's being loyal fiercely to his warrior code, which is honor, and that's honor to the king, who really represents his full purpose. And that's however that looks, protecting the king, serving the king.
Yeah, and that really will make a lot of sense too when we talk about the king archetype in particular, I think. There was one story in the book that has stuck in my memory, and it's of this samurai that's at war, and he's about to execute this soldier on the other side of the, on the opposing army or whatever. And the guy's on his knees and he's about to strike him with his sword, and the guy spits in his face, and he sheathes his sword and walks away.
Yeah.
And the reason why is because he was angry. It made him angry, and he was going to attack the guy out of anger instead of the actual reason why they were at war. Mm-hmm. So he was like, I'm not honoring my code by doing that. So he sheathes his sword and walks away. Right. I thought that as an example of the warrior was really great, really accurate. It's like where am I? What am I acting out of? Because I think it's like the warrior is one of those things that you determine, and I think the lover is oftentimes is the source of the principles that are important to us and all these sorts of things, and the king, and then we commit to those things, and then the warrior is kind of like, okay, where is this action proceeding from? Is this in alignment with what I believe in, my inner structure?
Right. My integrity with my code.
Right. Yeah,
and if I'm not, then is it appropriate to act in this moment? Right. One of the other traits of the warrior is that their purpose is often to destroy. But when you look at it in that way, for the mature warrior, they're looking to destroy that which is negative and that which is harmful to the world. So it's when you are embodying that full warrior in that balance, then that becomes your guiding light and your compass. And if things don't fall in line with the negative and the harmful, and you end up being the one that could potentially be harming, then turning that warrior back on yourself and saying, hey, whoa, what's going on? Like, this isn't the way you choose to show up. So what is it that you need to do now? You need to be put in the brigade for a little bit, and maybe that time out that you need so that you can say, all right, well, how do I come back and be a positive force that is there for the greater good of all, because the warrior also put me in check.
Yeah. And one of the things that really sticks out to me about the warrior is the split-second decisions. Being able to have this quick, like, okay, I need to make a decision right now. And being able to do it, but then continue into the movement of whatever it is that you're going for. Mm-hmm. And I wrote down, thinking too much can lead to doubt, and doubt to hesitation, and hesitation to inaction. And the warrior is very much about action, about going forward and getting things done. Mm-hmm. And also with what you were saying about destroying, I wrote this from the book too. the warrior destroys only what needs to be destroyed in order for something new and fresh, more alive and more virtuous to appear. And it's kind of like breaking down when there's like the empire has become corrupt, and there's a tyrannical sort of regime happening, or there's something, like there's morally what's going on is not right, or this is not healthy, the warrior is about that. It's like, okay, this is no longer serving us, let's get rid of that. Absolutely. We're going to bring in something better, bring in something loving, something righteous.
Right, and the mission supersedes the relationships. So even if the relationship, like if in your case that the warrior witnesses this upheaval taking place, or this shift towards that which isn't serving the greater good, that he's willing to stand up for what the mission is, which is to demolish the negativity, that harmfulness, and demolish it in any person, any being, any relationship. And not to say, not in a way that doesn't, not in a way that's unconscious, but in a way that really cuts through, gets to the point, because the warrior isn't working out of his mind. He is working based on the polishing of his attitude, of his emotions, of his body. And once that's polished, he can cut through that bullshit with the sharpest blade.
Yeah, it's like that really clear action, the absolutely knowing where you're coming from, and holding ground in that. Yeah. Another thing that I remember reading about the warrior was, it was talking about the samurais and how they had death as their eternal companion. And one of the things that it said about that was, when you have death as your eternal companion, every act counts and every act is meaningful. Because every act could be your last.
Yeah.
And I thought that was really, really awesome. The warrior is also about having control, first of all, over his mind and his attitudes. And it said the body will follow. And the warrior is about being all that he can be, about being the greatest version. Yeah, I think that's like, in a nutshell, kind of like the warrior, a good portrayal of the warrior archetype. Do you want to talk about the shadows?
Absolutely. So the two shadows of the warrior are the sadist and the masochist. And so first, just going into the sadist, that's the active pole. I think they talk about the active and the passive poles. And so the active pole of that shadow warrior would be the one that has that detachment from life, that then really leaves the door open towards cruelty and seeking pain in others, and that could be in humans or animals or however that looks, but really being vulnerable in relationships, and so not really being fully developed in that way, where they're cutting through the bullshit because it's for the greater good, but more because I'm vulnerable, the way that I'm acting out is in a way to inflict the pain so that it protects my own vulnerability. So yeah, in other ways is, it's in that same breath of the warrior having his or her own vulnerability, they also distribute a hate or a weakness towards vulnerability. So you may see the bully there, where they're now projecting that hidden masochist, which is the passive pole. They're projecting it in a way that now is giving them pleasure in tormenting, and that's however that looks. And so maybe it's seeing somebody who is comfortable in their own vulnerability and feels very safe, or that maybe is not embodying their full selves, and instead of helping them, calling that out and shedding such a big light on it that it really shames that person. That's more of that sadistic outlook, that unconscious warrior that really isn't out to help them, they're ultimately out to protect their own vulnerability, and the way that they do that is now by shedding these big, huge spotlights on everybody else's and making those light, and then taking some sort of enjoyment on that projection.
And I think the way that you explained it of protecting a vulnerability is really true, and also sheds light on the bipolarity that it is too, because those people that are the sadist, the abuser of people, that's their relationship with themselves when they're at home.
Yeah.
You know, and that's them, that's their own inner voice talking to themselves in a huge way, you know.
Yeah, I think you pretty much covered it, is that typically the sadist has a low sense of self-worth, and they have that self-torment that's taking place, and so it's really, they're burning themselves out because they're not allowing that balance to come into themselves.
Yeah, I think it's a protecting of the vulnerability, and the funny thing is, it's like through that way of acting, what you're doing is you're blocking out also any encouragement and any love from coming in. You know, the way that shell is. Another thing that I thought was really important about the warrior was that, and all of the archetypes go together, like the balance is when they're all together and all working together. And the warrior archetype in particular was really clear about the importance of balance with the other archetypes, because the warrior on its own can be very robotic and not really care about, because one of the things about the warrior is there's a sense of commitment to the principles through the sense of honor or whatever it is, beyond personal feelings, beyond feelings. So it's really important that there's a balance of the warrior and the lover, so that there is compassion and a sense of connectedness with people and kind of connecting with them in their vulnerability and their frailty. It's important to have a balance of the warrior and the magician, so that there's mastery and control over himself. And one of the biggest things about the magician is being able to observe emotions while they're there without being attached to them, but also not suppressing them. So the warrior is really about the action and about the commitment, and so having that balance is really important. And then the magician alone doesn't have the ability to act or the capacity to act, and that's the warrior's specialty. So it's kind of like the balance in that way. And then with the warrior and the king, standing in the center, generative, new and more vigorous, shepherding his people into a new era they themselves would not have the courage to face without his leadership, without his access to these two mature masculine energies. And those two archetypes together, it's like the warrior being like the acting, the decisive, the movement, and then the king being the like encouraging and affirming and grounded in calmness, centeredness, and knowing who he is and that sort of thing. And also seeing that in other people.
So the masochist, that's that passive pull of the shadow warrior, where they're projecting the warrior energy on everybody else. Like, I'm not the warrior, everybody else is. I see the warrior in you, I see the warrior in you. And wow, that's super cool, but I'm not the warrior. I'm just this lowly subject, being, consort, whatever you want to call me. And I wish I had that. And at the same time, that in himself just really, it starts to embody this impotence, this vulnerability in their presence, where they're never showing up for themselves because they're the damsel in distress, essentially. And then they're not able to defend themselves. They're always allowing people to manipulate them or to mess with them. And they're just going throughout their life in that way of constantly being the victim or the damsel in distress, in the fairy tales.
Right. Yeah, I think a lot of times, once again, like when we're children, the way that we're brought up, and it just is kind of like one of those things where, I think a lot of people haven't maybe been told that like you are worth something, like you have value, we all do, And that's just kind of their self-repeating, fulfilling prophecy and the belief system that they just kind of continue. Is like, I'm not worthy and I don't have anything to offer, and nobody would ever like me anyway, and it just kind of goes into that depression.
Right. Yeah, and then you start to attract and encourage other people to be the sadist in your life. And when you start to feel enough of that and experience enough of that sadist energy with yourself as the masochist, a lot of times it ends up creating this other result, which is then you snapping and becoming the sadist yourself.
Oh yeah.
In very inopportune, unfortunate times. Because it's unhealthy and somebody's pushed your buttons, and you've allowed them to push your buttons, and you haven't.
It's
set
the
your
guy
boundaries.
from Office Space that burns the building down.
It's
But they
Milton.
let him like push him into the basement.
Yes, exactly. You took my stapler,
Yeah.
and then now you took my desk.
Yeah.
You know, and now I don't get a piece of cake.
Yeah, and then
Okay, I'm gonna set the building on fire.
Right, yeah.
Yeah.
And that is all, like, just the way that switches is like it's so true how it's bipolar like that. It's so crazy. So okay, so we want to talk about accessing the warrior in his fullness.
Yes.
Okay, that's what we didn't talk about.
Absolutely.
Do you want to go first?
Perfect. Yeah. So let's see. So just rounding out accessing the warrior in his fullness. You know, we say that the warrior is the source of energy. He's the doer. He's not so much the thinker, and he's a fighter, but his ultimate fight is really for self-mastery. That battle within is the fight, and so those shadow sides, of course, being the sadist and the masochist. Well, the balance of that is, or at least ways to then access that fullness of the warrior. You know, one is to be decisive, to pick your path, and then to honor it in its fullness. Really, know what you want and state it. And it's okay if later on down the line that changes, but really committing to that fullness of where your path is in that moment that you are aligned with, and moving forward in it with full purpose.
Absolutely. I think it's, like you said, the things change over time, and I think committing to something with the ability to know that it can change in the future is really big. And also just the more that you connect with the lover and the more you kind of have a sort of bigger picture for yourself, a lot of times you'll go into experiences and realize that's not for you and that's not what you want, but that's beneficial to you in that way. And I think a lot of times it's easy to be like, I feel this way personally with a lot of stuff that I want to do with the videos and stuff like that. I have like this huge idea of what I want it all to look like one day, and it's easy to be like, oh, but that's not here now, and that's not what I want. I want that at the end. But it's really like, I really think the warrior is about what is it that I need to do right now? What steps do I need to take right now to get me to the next level? What's the next step to take?
Yeah.
And obviously, so having discipline in that, being committed to saying that you're going to do something and doing it no matter how you feel. I think anytime that you practice that and you have a good balance of that practice in your life, even if it's like one thing a week that you're like, I'm committed to this, I'm going to do it, and it's supporting the person that I want to become, that's a great way to access the warrior in his fullness.
Absolutely, yeah, and stating it clearly to others, communicating it clearly, clear communication, being assertive, because you can have all of that for yourself, but then when other people come in, there may be a feeling or a sense that I don't want to say that because I might hurt somebody's feelings, or maybe they won't accept me for what my path is currently. But that is part of your mission to be walking in your fullness, is to also communicate to others where that path is for you, and being comfortable with your no, with stating your no, knowing where your boundaries are, and using that no with power, not using it as the masochist turned sadist. Well, I'm just gonna say no because I haven't said it in a while, and so I'm gonna say it to you. Like, really? What is that? What is that serving?
It's out of the emotional aspect anyway. It's not really the warrior in his fullness.
Yeah, it's okay. This is where my yes is, and this is where my no is, and I can clearly communicate that to you and to you, and if it doesn't matter who came up and asked me, I'm in full alignment with communicating where my yes is and where my no is.
I think the last thing that I would share about the warrior is that whenever we authentically pursue our dreams, our life path, we come up against a lot of fear and a lot of anxiety, like naturally. And bringing balance to the warrior is having the courage to move through that, being committed to that action, you know, through all of that, through all of those feelings and through the fear.
Yeah, and like you said, committed to the action, even physical action. You think of exercise, that's part of being the warrior, however that looks to you. Committing to that. We talked about that earlier today.
That reminds me of, I heard this Joe Rogan podcast where he was talking about working out, and I loved what he said about it, because he said, when you decide that I'm going to work out 3 days a week or whatever, and you do that, and it's like, and you do that no matter, even if it's, you feel super shitty one day and you're like, man, I don't want to do this, but you go and you have the best workout you can, and you know, you get it done. It's like that aspect of discipline is working its way through the whole rest of your through your life, you know. And it's, if you say, every time you say, oh man, I'm not really feeling like it, I'm gonna give in to how I'm feeling and not do it, then you're carrying that out into all the other aspects of your life.
Very true.
And that's a really empowering aspect of the warrior, is over time, whenever you have one thing, even if it's, I'm just going to get up at 7 o'clock every morning, and that's, you know, that if you consistently do that, discipline will work its way into other aspects of your life. And as you work through this self-mastery that is the warrior, you'll come into more and more power to be able to say, I'm going to do this, and you can actually have the power to do it over time through all of the emotions and waves that happen. You'll be able to stick with it and do it.
At that side, how they are constantly projecting giggle, constantly projecting, that's cut. We'll just marker that.